Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Season 8, Episode 11 of Music is Not a Genre. Do it with me, MxG. This week's episode, and it's the final episode of 2025, is the Freewheeling Catch-Up Machine number 12. What's a good music podcast? And I will get to that in a second, but as always, thank you for watching and listening. Listeners, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre. You get a video for every episode of this podcast. Watchers, go to nickdimatteo.com/musicisnotagenre if you'd rather just listen. And everyone, go to patreon.com/musicisnotagenre to support this podcast, my band rec, and everything I do. And by the way, it's only $1 a month right now, and I'm going to leave that up for just a bit. I would love to have you on patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. It's only $1 a month, but it makes a huge difference to me and indie creators like me. Speaking of indie creators, my new Christmas song, My Xmas Wish, is out right now. Please go to nickdimatteo.com/music and follow all of the links. The discography will take you to my singles, and that's where you'll find My Xmas Wish. And I have a song coaching service, nickdimatteo.com/thesongcoach. This is your year, 2026, New Year's resolutions. You want to finally write that Christmas song, could be a Christmas song, I don't know. That song of any kind that you've been sitting on for years, or that's been swirling in your head, you never really wrote anything of, or you're almost done. You know music, you don't know music, doesn't matter. If you want to write a song, go to nickdimatteo.com/thesongcoach, book a free 30-minute call, and let's get started. That's me. And as always, like, share, subscribe, rate, review. Please do that. If there's one thing I could say for you to do this year, it's that, because it really, really does help more than even I realize. And so I would appreciate that, of course. And finally, I'm not going to mention that. Hey, this is me not editing, right? I'm one take Willie here, as I've mentioned before. I'm not gonna edit this out. You're gonna get it all exactly as is, and we're gonna get on to the title and topic again, which is the Freewheeling Catch-Up Machine number 12. It's a dozen, and the subtopic here is what's a good music podcast. So I do these catch-up episodes 2-3 times a year to go through your fan comments, some thoughts I may have left out, corrections, things like that. A look forward sometimes, the usual. I'm honestly surprised this is only the 12th. I feel like I've done more, but that's cool. The subtitle here, now I listened to a good dozen podcasts, I think maybe a little more. And I've listened to exactly too many music podcasts. That's an exact number. And while I've learned a ton, and had some fun, there's not a single one I flat out love, which is fine. It's very similar to, now that's not the case for music. There's music I flat out love. There are no music podcasts I flat out. There are other podcasts, non-music, that I flat out love, like the History of the English Language and Smartless and stuff, but and Fall of Civilizations. But no, there are no music podcasts I flat out love. And that's just, whatever. I'll talk about why later on. What I'm getting from all this is that everyone is doing their thing, and no one's thing is exactly like anyone else's thing. So after I go through all the usual catch-up stuff, comments, etc., I'm going to break down the kinds of music podcasts that I've been listening to and discuss their pros and cons, what I like, what I don't like, what works, what doesn't, without naming names, and compare them to Music is Not a Genre and what I do here. And now the reason I'm not naming names, well, I get a little critical, even though I am respectful and supportive. I will name those names in the bonus MxTRA at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. If you go there, the bonus this week is I'm going to go into even more depth about the music podcasts that I'm talking about, and I will tell you which ones they are and recommend that you check them out yourself and judge for yourself. Show format, diving right into your comments and mine, segueing into the discussion of music podcasts, slamming down some conclusions, and then the featured song and questions. And I already told you about the bonus, so you go check that out. Sources, streaming services, Google, and that's about it. Your comments, right? I think maybe LinkedIn, there were some comments there, TikTok. Disclaimers and warnings. These are my opinions. And like I said above, I'm not naming names for the podcasts. And that goes for even if I mostly like the podcast, which is the case a couple of times. This is more about podcast types, music podcasts and approaches, rather than any individual ones. I'm kind of generalizing. So with that said, let's get to the first section of the podcast, which is comments, your comments, my comments, etc. So I put up a live version I did during the pandemic of the Prince song Mountains, because I thought it was a lesser known song of his that deserved to be spotlit, and I've always wanted to perform it. I performed it on the piano, and somebody named Carl Cooper on YouTube said Prince would have been proud. I love that. That almost made me tear up because I revere Prince, and the fact that somebody would think that from that performance, which I think was really good, but it wasn't great because I was doing pandemic shows. I wasn't super rehearsing. I love that this guy loved that. My Lon Dorsey interview. Hustle Dancing said Lou Rawls Jr. died after this was taped. Said David Ruffin Jr. wasn't happy. Lou didn't take care of himself. Think about that combo, which David Ruffin had a tragic end too. But Lou Jr. died a couple of years ago, I believe. So I find that maybe this guy was trying to make a joke saying that okay, so what he was saying was this is about a 3-year-old episode, and that's when Lou Rawls Jr. died. I appreciate that Hustle Dancing gave me that information. I would not have known that. I didn't look it up. I do remember looking up Lou Rawls Jr. at the time and knowing at the time he was alive, but I didn't know what had happened afterwards. So thank you. CDs versus streaming, which is an excerpt, a quickie video from my bonus episode on what's the highest quality recorded music. Klaxz, Klaxz, from an Asian country, so I wasn't 100% sure of a lot of what was on their YouTube channel. Said, I've been streaming for about 10 years now. I started downloading MP3 files in 2008, and I thought they were okay. I've been listening to Apple Music for a while, but I bought 6 CDs. They are Iron Maiden, Avenged Sevenfold, Linkin Park, My Chemical Romance, Bob Marley, Bring Me the Horizon, and Bad Omens. And wow, the difference is amazing. At 80% volume, my speakers would get distorted and sound weird. Now that I'm listening on CDs, the sound quality is way better, and there's no clipping or distortion at higher volumes. I tried Spotify lossless. It wasn't as good as a CD. I have a Klipsch reference Premier RP1200 SW subwoofer with Klipsch R820F tower speakers, and an Onkyo TX8220 2-channel stereo receiver, and an Onkyo C7030 CD player connected to the receiver with a digital coax. CDs still sound way better. The clarity of the instruments is amazing. I can hear every individual instrument from highs and lows. The voice of the artist sounds so smooth. I mostly listen to rock, jazz, and blues, and some country, and the occasional Latin music. The only streaming service I found that comes close to CD quality was Qobuz, which was a sponsor for a while for me. Here, and first of all, I love all that information. I'm not a gearhead, but it's good to know that there are people out there who are still looking for good speakers and receivers and things like that. It's just not something most people talk about anymore. And, kill me if you want. I think most people would agree that CDs on the whole are of a better quality than streaming, because most things on the whole are of a better quality than streaming. But I have also said that CDs were the highest quality ever commercially viable format of music ever, and still the case. There's certainly high quality audio digitally. Most of it we don't hear. And it's interesting to hear that this person tried out the lossless Spotify and didn't like it. Here's the thing. I haven't tried it yet. I said last week that I would, and I will next year in 2026, because I'm curious. I already know, and I know this myself and other people have said, that Apple's bass sounds better than Spotify's bass. Spotify's compression algorithm sucks. Spotify's compression algorithm sucks. Their normalization sucks. And will that change for lossless? It'll be higher quality. You'll hear more depth. But if it's going through the same algorithms, then maybe it won't change. I don't know. I may report on that next year. From that same CD versus streaming, Eduard Verestaki said, I still record and listen to cassettes to this very day. And amazingly enough, when recorded on a decent, legitimate cassette deck, my cassettes sound no different than CDs. Digital and streaming files from computer are a lot quieter than CDs or cassettes. Every time I record from a computer or any other digital device, like my phone, for example, I have to crank up the volume and recording levels on my amplifier. With CDs or cassettes, it's the opposite. I have to turn everything down to avoid distortion or oversaturation of sound. MP3s, FLAC, FLAC, and pretty much any digital file is a compressed file and doesn't sound nowhere near as good as CD or cassette. So a lot of agreement, a lot of disagreement there. First of all, I love that you said that. I love that you think about it that much. And I love that you tried out different formats. I love cassettes. They're my favorite warp format, meaning the artifacts of cassettes I prefer over the artifacts of vinyl or digital or anything else. That said, even with DATs, which DATs are, not common, but the digital audio tape is pretty close. I mean, a lot of the things I recorded in the studio in the 90s were done on DAT. So my copies had to come from the DATs. So they were basically CD quality. But since that's not a thing for people, let's forget those. Generally speaking, cassettes, as much as I love them, do not have a higher quality than CDs or digital. Well, cassettes might have a higher quality than MP3s in many cases, depending on how much they were played. But in general, I'm saying. Now, I do believe that CDs do, as I mentioned before. But if you go for the absolute highest quality lossless, like a highest quality wave or AFF or FLAC, whatever it is, whichever one, zero compression in terms of the file, not in terms of the sound, both really, I think that you're going to get up to the level of CDs. But where do you find those? You don't find them on the vast majority of streaming services. And even some of those, the highest quality still isn't as high as CDs. All right, next topic, rockism versus poptimism. Asterius4271 said, almost halfway into the video, and just wanted to say thank you for shedding light on this topic, especially historically. I had some lectures this week on rockism and read about that New York Times article you mentioned. Finding out about the disco record burning and burning of other records by people of color or specifically targeted for their sexuality was very eye-opening. Sadly echoed that of book burnings in the 1930s Germany, where the books were considered unworthy of being taken seriously intellectually, and also was specifically targeted because of the identity of those who wrote them. First of all, I want to know who you are, Asterius. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. One thing I would like to pursue is a professorship somewhere. I believe that what I do here on Music Is Not a Genre would translate really super well to a college setting. And the fact that you had some lectures on rockism and that you found my podcast to offer anything at all of value is very flattering, and I really appreciate that. And I also agree wholeheartedly about the disco record burning and how it mimics things like book burnings, which are still happening today, things like that. So thank you. Pointer Sisters episode. Amelia Ray, good friend, songwriting colleague of mine, I asked about what people's favorites were, and she said, my favorite Pointer Sisters song, probably a tie between Automatic and Yes We Can. And Automatic is my favorite, and Yes We Can is up there, so I got to respect those for sure. Steven Anderson said, music is not a genre, but there are genres in music. In response to the Pointer Sisters, it's fine. I don't know if you saw the episode, and that's fine, Mr. Anderson. I mean, I completely agree, and I've said more than once, I actually love music genres, and I mess with them all the time, and I love recording things and producing things that lean towards genres very heavily. I've considered genres and said that they are shorthand, the way gender classification is and other classifications. They're an easy way in to understand something, but they are not the definition of that thing or the identity of that thing. And that's why I think you're right. There are genres in music, but music is not a genre. I would just reverse what you said, but honestly, I agree. I fully agree. RG on both YouTube and Facebook said, I'm here from your Facebook post. I think I know everything there is to know about the Pointer Sisters, so I'm looking forward to listening to this later. Whether I learn anything new or not, I'm sure I will enjoy this. Which, come in with an attitude like that anytime, because I understand skeptics. I can be a skeptic when I'm entering into something new, but I also have enough of an open mind to be like, I hear what you're saying, you know. And this is a very open mind. He went on to say, wow, I'm blown away by this video. What an incredible deep dive. I love your take on their catalog and your appreciation of their work, as well as your music knowledge. A very informed take. I love the Pointer Sisters, and I absolutely love this video. Thank you so much for highlighting the sisters. Fall in Love Again is a great one. I do love that song. I absolutely loved this podcast. Nick does a super deep dive into the sisters' catalog. You guys should check it out. So that was posted on Facebook, that part, and the other part was posted on YouTube. Thank you, RG. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's the impression I hope to make with every podcast I do. Jeff MJV, also on the Pointer Sisters. I've been a fan since the 80s and of everything they recorded. I've seen them many times live and still go when I can, because they are still out there with Ruth and the daughter and granddaughter. They have such an amazing catalog, and I tend to like their non-hits more than their hits. Discovery. They also did the Ain't Misbehavin' soundtrack, which I didn't know. I think I might have run across it and didn't mention it in the podcast, so thank you for mentioning that, Jeff. In their later albums, they released the wrong songs as singles, in my opinion, which he agrees with me. You know, the record companies don't always know. They often don't know. Missed opportunities to me, as far as later singles, were Eyes Don't Lie, Pride, I Will Be There, What a Woman Wants, Feel for the Physical. June did 2 solo albums. I did not know that. Or I didn't look it up, I guess. I did the albums, Bonnie's solo albums, I think, and Ruth, but I didn't look up June's. Second solo album had so much potential, but again, they chose the wrong singles. Yup. Second side on that album was really strong. Sadako Pointer, Ruth's granddaughter, has done some solo recording. I've heard of some of that. And did a remake of Happiness, which I didn't know. Another new fact, their song Hot Together has reached millions of streams on various platforms, including Spotify, because it was part of the Grand Theft Auto 6 soundtrack. Grand Theft Auto has done a lot of great things for music. It's been really neat to watch for us longtime fans. Yeah, when a band you like resurges. It wasn't a hit till now, but it was always a fan favorite, and they had it in their concert set for a very long time. It was so good live. So you provided, Jeff, more information that I didn't have in that Pointer Sisters podcast, and I can't thank you enough for that. Marianne Callender said, thank you so much for this Pointer Sisters episode. I'm a diehard fan. Love, 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 and appreciate these beautiful, supremely talented ladies. They definitely deserve more recognition. I'm glad you enjoyed the podcast then. My podcast on great producers. I forget which episode, first or second. Christopher Kissel from my website. Oh, that was both. So here's something. You're going to love this. As I audibly take a drink, because I don't edit. Yeah, that's what I needed. I stumbled across a link to one of your The Great Producers links on Blue Sky, and initially shared the links to part 1 and part 2. That was before I listened to either. I hate to be critical, so get ready, people. But I got about 3/4 of the way through part 1 and removed both links from my Blue Sky profile. I hate to say it, but you spent more time talking about yourself and asking for people to donate to your Patreon than on the subject of the podcast. While I'm being critical, on your website, the Submit Now button covers up the bottom of the message window so you can't see what you just typed. Please fix that. As for me, what a pivot. Almost 11 years ago, I started a website that you may find interesting. I'm not going to mention the name of the website. Now, here's the thing. I then responded and said, hey, you may not like that I promote things, but all podcasts promote things. Even freaking people who are making millions of dollars or whatever, hundreds of thousands of dollars in podcasts, they promote things. And more importantly, indie podcasts have to promote in order to stay alive, right? So I'm sorry that you're offended by that, but you are wrong that most of my content is about promotion. That is so untrue. I put my promotion up front because it's important enough to me to do that, and I want everybody to know that I am not doing this as a hobby, that support is important. Some people put it at the end, some people, whatever. I mention it periodically throughout the podcast when the bonus MxTRA comes up, because Patreon is one of the main ways people like me are sustained. So I'm sorry that you are offended by that. And I kind of said something similar to that. And I also said, you're promoting your own business and your own website, and you start with 2 criticisms. Not a great way to do it. You know, you want to be critical somewhere, fine, but that's not the way to do it. And then his response was, perhaps you didn't find either of my criticisms valid. There is nothing inaccurate about them. I bring them to your attention in the hope that you consider them going forward. And no, unlike you, I'm not trying to sell anything or entice anyone to use my service. I have spent thousands of dollars of my own money over the years for the hosting and other expenses of my website, and have never asked anyone for a contribution. Best of luck to you in the coming years. So there are so many things wrong with this. First of all, appreciate you doubling down on your criticisms, but yes, look, the button thing, I don't know. That button isn't even part of the website right now, or it might be, or it might have been the format, the platform you're using, or the browser, or if it was, mobile. I don't know. But you submitted successfully, and I'm sorry that was a problem. So there was some validity to that criticism. The other one is completely inaccurate. It's just fully inaccurate, and I'm okay with that. And I'm sorry that you think that it is accurate. If that's the impression you got, then you weren't really listening to the podcasts. I think you bringing something to someone's attention when they didn't ask for your advice is not a great thing. I don't think anybody should ever do that, frankly. If someone starts a sentence with, here's some advice, and you didn't ask for it, stop them, tune them out, or just say thank you and move on. Because even if their advice is valid, you didn't ask for it, you know. And this, I'm not trying to sell anything, is bullshit. You put your website up because you wanted me to use the service, and whether or not you use your own money to promote, that's on you. Because any good business person knows you get investors. You need to have a sustainable business in order for it to be a business. If all you're doing is throwing your own money at it and losing money, then it's not a business. Or it's this business, but it's not a sustainable business. Yeah, you have to do that too. And I do throw money at my own, stuff when needed. But these are all jobs, and you are promoting your own service. So just be honest with yourself. I think I might have said this, I said, consider that you might be conflicted about what you're doing, because there are many artists and entrepreneurs, freelancers, who are very sheepish about asking for help. And I used to be that way. I really used to be that way, until I realized that disrespects yourself. If you believe what you're doing is worthy, then you believe that people want to pay for it, want to spend the time with it. And I would you're not asking for my advice. You're also probably not listening. So I'll just throw it out there for anybody, really, which is examine your own attitudes toward what you're doing. I don't believe, and I've said this before, in asking friends and family for thousands of dollars to produce an album or whatever. I think, that if you get lucky enough to do that, and I've used to do that, then great. So there's ways in which asking for money doesn't make sense to me, but that's a personal thing. That's on me. I do believe that in general, we should all get paid for what we're doing. And however you need to do that, if it's ethical, good on you. And if you feel like that's not something that you should be doing, take a moment and examine how you really feel about what you're doing. My interview with Doug Gouget, Alex Gadd, who recommended Doug Gouget from the Rock and Roll Show podcast, great show. He said, great episode, support independent musicians creating original music, and then go see live music, because MxG, we don't know each other beyond what we do, and we've talked a couple of times, but I think Alex is great. I think his show is great. I'm glad that we are colleagues, and I appreciate that comment. Northern Soul. my episode on Northern Soul. Alan Patton 468 said, what he is talking about as an Englishman who grew up in that era relative to Northern Soul is beyond me. A little bit of overinterpretation, methinks. Or should I have said, what he's talking about as an Englishman who grew up in that era relative to Northern Soul is beyond me. A little bit of overinterpretation, methinks. Here's the thing. And this was a clip. This wasn't the full episode, so the person's impression was, not complete because it was just like a 1-minute clip or less than a minute. And I believe it was on artists who were inspired by Northern Soul, David Bowie and Roxy Music and the New Wave, New Romantics. If that wasn't that person's experience, I respect that. And I even said I would love to know more about your experience, Alan. I didn't get a response, but that is very, very true. But this is like verified stuff. Some of these artists actually talked about it in interviews, how the music that was being played by Northern Soul, which would not have been popular in the country if the movement hadn't been there, was heavily influencing many of these artists throughout their careers. So, but then again, you checked out the clip and I appreciate that. General podcast review. So not specific to any episode. A guy through my website. Oh, no, actually, I already talked about that. And I can skip over that and get to the last comment in this section, which is Steve Erickson. Frequent contributor to this show, frequent guest, and we'll be on next year. We're going to discuss a book that I haven't started reading yet. He said about the nostalgia episode, that was an excellent podcast. You seem to know more rockist dudes than I do. A big problem with nostalgia is the way the past gets mythologized, and then even people who lived through it believe those myths. That, to me, I would think there are a couple of big problems with nostalgia, and I'm not going to go over them in depth because that was, the episode from a couple weeks ago. But I think if I were summing it up, it would be, one, what it does to a person's own experience, curtailing new experiences and taking them out of the present moment and making them live in the past. That's number one. But number two is what Steve said, which is, these are people who mythologize their own past and the past they experienced, maybe like the Northern Soul guy, I don't know. And that causes them to make decisions about the present and future that are severely off-center. They're going to be based on false information, based on myths. And that's why we have regression. That's why we have issues with progress and things like that. So, Steve and I talk about stuff like this all the time through emails usually. And when we get together, I couldn't agree more. And if you didn't see the nostalgia episode or hear it, please go check it out. It's vital. And that is it for the comments for this. Let's go quickly with what's coming up in 2026 for this podcast. I have such a long list of upcoming topics that I know I will not get to them all this season or even in the calendar year of 2026. And that excites me because I'm excited about these topics. But that said, here are a few topics I am strongly considering I will almost definitely do. At some point, I'm going to break down the Beatles Anthology 4. Yes, I am. It's going to be a podcast, probably. I'm going to do a full episode on Fountains of Wayne. I did an episode on the death of Adam Schlesinger back in 2020. He kicked off my Death is Dumb series. But I'm going to do a full episode of Fountains of Wayne since I was just in a cover band of them, and they're one of my favorites and everybody should know. I'm going to do an episode on the history of jam bands with a guest co-host, expert, Scott Blaze. He's going to come in and talk about jam bands with me. I'm going to do an episode I'm calling Quirk Over Quality, the truth about cult hits. So what is it about cult hits that make them cult, and how does that compare to the actual quality? Logos and album art I'm going to do because I am debuting a new Rec logo next year. I've been doing new store designs. If you go to the Rec and MxG official stuff store, which there's a link at nickdamadio.com. I think it's /shop or something like that. It's on the menu. Just go to shop. You'll find that store there. I have over a dozen new line art designs. Line art is a passion of mine. The new Rec logo is going to be a passion. And I have passion for art in general and album art and single art in particular and logos very much. So I'm going to do a whole episode on all of that. Probably wear some of my own shirts. I'm going to do one called Momentum Makes the Moment. How important momentum is to so many things, to both the business side and the art side. Episode called Artists Without a Center. So how do those artists ultimately fail, whether it's professionally or artistically, why they don't have a center? I'll explain what that means. I'll do one on mega huge artists in the world that the U.S. knows nothing about. Ever heard of Status Quo? Indochine? You've heard of Spandau Ballet, but did you know they were a mega? You did if you checked out my bonus MxTRA, but I'm going to do an episode on a bunch of those artists from different countries who are not just famous in that country, but like mega huge. I have one slated on Madonna, never done. Hall & Oates, Philly people. And that's as far as I know. I may do some on, of course, an extension of my producers series, the great producers, going with the 1970s and 1980s, sometime in the winter for sure. Now, music-wise, what's coming up? Other than the 2 singles, which are out now, my Xmas Wish by Nick, I revived my artist name Nick, and You Know You're Right, No Fun Pushy mix, the remix of the Kite to Candom single, which you're gonna hear at the end of this. I am going to do that big project that I talked about. I've talked about a couple times, called Valley of the Unreleased. I have dozens and dozens of songs from way back that I never did anything with because they didn't fit on any project, and I plan on recording those properly, rewriting where necessary, but trying to keep them generally intact and releasing that on that. That's the big thing, I think, for next year. And something I only recently announced, which is I just got sync licensing representation. So many people don't know what this is, even musicians. And let me explain it very quickly before we get to the break. And that is that when you hear a song in television or film or commercial, what have you, podcast, as a theme song, that was sync licensing did that, meaning the sound was synced to a picture, to a film. That's why they call it that. That's how a lot of people make their money in the music business. If you get like great sync licensing, you can make a living off of one song or 2 songs. And it is very, 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 very difficult to do independently, other than with independent productions, which I've done a lot of. But when you're talking about the bigger stuff that makes the real money, you need representation. I just got that representation from a company called Sweet on Top. They'll be representing only my 90s catalog because that's the kind of music that is being looked for a lot for their company, and will expand that as that goes on. But I believe that in 2026, that will be a big part of what I do, is the sync licensing with this company, and I appreciate them taking me on. And that's it for now. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about those other music podcasts. So stick around. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of Music is Not a Genre. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, if you'd like to learn more about the music I do with my band Rec or any other projects or anything else about me, go to nickdematteo.com. That's Nick, DEMATTEO.com. And everything is there. There's even a link to a merch store where you can get t-shirts and mugs and hats and totes and notebooks and so many other things. I'm always adding new products there. Great way to support the podcast. And finally, go to patreon.com/music is not a genre if you'd really like to show your support. My fans and lovely family there get exclusives and other perks and early releases, and they get to suggest topics for future podcasts as well. Thanks for listening to the mid-roll. Now back to the show. All right, we are back with Freewheeling Catch-Up Machine number 12. Let's get to the second half of this, the second part of this. I try to add a theme to my catch-up episodes that goes beyond just catching up. And this one is those other music podcasts, meaning I'm going to talk about other music podcasts. Now, why does this matter? So, as I mentioned before, we're all out here doing our things. They're all different. And hopefully we're doing them because we are the most passionate about them, and the way we do them, we're passionate about. And we're passionate about talking about all of this. We're also all hopefully making some money, varying degrees, since all of these take a lot of work. But all that said, few of the podcasts I listen to are hosted by people who are actual hosts. People who are good at public speaking, who know how to deliver a line, pace a show, write in a way that flows for audio and not just for the words on the page. And since we are all doing shows that purport to be entertainment, along with whatever education there is, regardless, in fact, of how much knowledge you're getting from them, they are first and foremost entertainment. It is all of our responsibilities to do our best to entertain first, to present well first, then to have substance, to educate. I mean, you can find almost 100% of what anyone talks about on your own and absorb it however you want. So the only reason to tune in to any podcast, including this one, is the only reasons are A, you like the subjects, and B, you like the presentation. And that to me is even more important because I have certainly not listened to certain things or watched certain things of subjects I really like because the presentation just didn't do it for me. So I say this because I take it seriously with MxG, with this show. Music is not a genre. And also feel it's fair to lump this show in with the others and talk honestly about my own pros and cons. So again, I'm not going to name names. I will do that in the bonus MxTRA, patreon.com/music is not a genre. These podcasts that I'm using as templates for types of podcasts and their certain characteristics, I'm going to tell you which ones they are in the bonus MxTRA at patreon.com/music is not a genre. Here are the types of podcasts I listen to, including descriptions and what I like and don't like. So number one, popular music history. Very academic and thorough approach that covers developments in music over the ages and includes things that were happening with the people and involved, their own personal lives and business and stuff like that, as well as historically what was happening in the times that these songs were made. It is sequential. It's telling one long story by telling multiple small stories and includes some, again, social and political commentary. I intend to listen to every episode of this because I like history. I'm a completist when it comes to storytelling. I like that there's a lot of history in here and that it is not meant to be a definitive history, but is so thorough that you're going to get a lot from it anyway. I like how socially responsible it is. I am somebody, as you know, who does not shy away from talking about social and political issues, and I think if that's not a part of the subject, then don't throw it in there. But if you're talking about, let's say, Phil Spector, you gotta mention the heinous acts and the way he treated people even before he murdered anybody and stuff like that. And anything else, or if you're talking about soul music or hip hop, you're gonna talk about race, politics, and things like that. I love how thoroughly it deals with the subjects. The caveat here is that I think this podcast is a little too weighted towards social responsibility. And even though I agree with the host's political and social outlook, I find the commentary too heavy-handed, a little too like I'm taking on the mantle of being a responsible person, which it's better to be too responsible than not responsible enough. But I think it's overstated, and that's that person's prerogative. The host thoroughness is to me a little too thorough. I think as far as knowing how to present something, you got to know when to edit. You got to know what to leave out. One of the reasons I do bonuses is because those specific topics often don't fit into the flow of the show itself. And if you're going to do a tangent on an entire artist within the body of an episode that deals with a completely different artist, maybe save that as a small episode or something. It's a programming note. The subject itself is great, but it's very long. I also find the pacing so painfully. Now, here's the thing. I have an issue with pacing almost across the board. There are podcasts I utterly love that I find a little too slow. And that's me. I run at like 1.2 speed in my life, and I talk that way. I like to listen that way too. So that might just be me. I'm not somebody who wants a podcast in general to be soothing. I want it to be engaging. And if your pace is slow and your tone is a little too mellifluous, and if you are putting your moments of thought in between the things you are saying and catering to only the slowest listeners, then you're killing me is what you're doing. So there are podcasts I listen to at 1.2. There's one I listen to at 1.5 because I love the subjects, but I find the hosts annoying at times. And it's not a music podcast, but I'm just saying in general, the pacing is painfully slow. Both the speed of the speech and I said this before, I don't do music snippets for many reasons, but one of the reasons, and the one that is germane here, is it slows down things. If you're coming to a podcast, why? You're listening to somebody talk. You want to hear music? What do? You go listen to music. The combination of the two is rarely done well, and I think it's overdone. I think it's a trope that everyone uses now because somebody said you have to. And I just find that to be no. If there's no visual, especially, then you're killing me. It's too much. And if your snippets are 30 seconds or more, I mean, they should be 10, 15 seconds at most. I find the delivery of this podcast dry and the writing stilted. When a host is a writer by trade, generally speaking, their presentation is not great because they're writing for people to read it, whether they know it or not. And so it works like it might be pithy on the page and it might be really stilted when you say it, especially if you don't know how to present it. Also, not loud enough. I can barely hear this podcast when I'm in a room that has any kind of noise. And the volume difference between the speech and the too frequent music is not normalized. And normalization is something that's pretty easy to do. That said, the host is so responsible, so endearing, so passionate, and the attempts at humor are also so endearing that it's hard to dislike this show. And the final word is that while the show is as unrockist as it can possibly be, it is generationist, and that it claims no significant music history and development have happened after 1999 in the rock world, and that is bullshit. Number 2 type of podcast, the historical music chart analysis. Has various topics. Sometimes it's specific artists. Sometimes it's an overall idea and breaks it down based on what the charts say with historical context. I am a numbers guy often, as you might tell from my album series, among others. So I appreciate learning what the charts have said over the years. And this guy is clearly very knowledgeable and adds a lot of chart insight. I also like a lot of the conceptual episodes he's done, ones that carry an idea through the decades. This is, however, not a podcast I will listen to every episode of, and it's in part because the guy's reliance on numbers as interpretation often results in unfair judgments of artistry and the artists themselves. There are few, if any, qualifications having to do with separating the biz from the art, which, okay, so you're talking about the business part because it's charts, but make a note that the charts don't, rule the art. Art, not chart, whatever. And like far too many critics, he considers anything not in the top 40 to not be a hit. Parentheses, laugh is what I put in my notes because I've said this before. Somebody just arbitrarily said if it's not top 40, it's not a hit. So one-hit wonders are people that only have one top 40 hit. But if your hit was 50 or 60 or even 99, that's not considered a hit. When you're talking about it's 99th in a sea of thousands and thousands and thousands of songs, then you are a business person and not an artist. This person also uses often music snippets that don't actually illustrate the theoretical concept he's talking about, which when you're not a music insider, look, doesn't mean you're not going to put out good content. Not everyone needs to be an insider to talk about something, but then don't do that. Or check it with somebody who does know music. His delivery isn't bad. The pacing's actually pretty good, but the writing, again, very writery. Doesn't make for great entertainment. Finally, he is a critic who only sometimes shows any understanding of what it's like to have a music career and actually make the music. Comes across as thinking he's got the final word in this stuff, which I gotta put a caveat there because I like to do that too. And I will often say, it's my opinion, whatever, but I don't think it makes for good presentation to constantly apologize for what you're saying or to constantly qualify what you're saying. If you can blanket statement say this is not meant to be definitive blah, 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 then just do it is better than presenting it in a way that where you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, I might be right and whatever. Number 3, deep dives into individual albums is another type of podcast I listen to. This has no host, this one. It lets the actual album creators do the talking. It's from the standpoint of the music insiders. I don't have anything bad to say about any individual episode or the overall concept. Hearing the musicians speak is just wonderful. And I relate to a lot of what they say. I do wish it would venture beyond indie rock and cover more mainstream and other genres that are not rock at all. But that may be because it's hard to get those creators. I mean, the person, whoever's producing this is getting the actual creators. That can't be easy. I don't listen to every episode of this since some of the albums I'm not super interested in, but I admire and respect that they're there anyway. Number 4, deep dives into only one artist, either their entire careers or one key part of it. This whole show in particular is only that one artist, and they provide facts and context. They're usually heavy on insight and opinion, which I'm fine with both of those things because there's a lot of facts too. The 2 podcasts I've listened to that have done this, I've gone through every episode of. One, to be fair, was only 7 episodes, but the other one had hundreds of episodes. It's not really running anymore, or at least it's on a long hiatus. I liked both, especially because I love the artists they covered. One was very documentary style, very slickly produced, and well done. Very professional. And sometimes you need that professional touch in order for things to flow the way they should flow. The other is just 2 guys riffing on one of their favorite bands, and I love that kind of presentation when it's done well, which this was. I also like that podcast, the riffing podcast, didn't use snippets. And they talk about, oh, we didn't get the rights, whatever. I don't care. I don't care rights or no rights, fair use, blah, blah, blah. If there is not, I'm not a fan. So I'm glad they didn't do that. The only downside of the one's documentary is that I wish it was longer and it was still going. And the only downside of the riffing one is that they don't always interpret the music and the theory side of things very correctly, but that's okay. I mean, it happens. And their opinions are not always hitting the mark because they're not insiders. How or why a song or a musical decision was made. I like that they put it as speculation, but I often disagree with that speculation. Not always, though. Another type of podcast, deep dive into only one song. Each episode breaks down only a single song, infrequently, but sometimes with the actual creator or with a celebrity who also loves the song, discusses how it was made, the people who made it, the parts of the song, and how they come together to make the whole, how it compares with other songs. It is non-genre specific, sometimes covers elements of music theory. I'd actually like to get more granular next year. Maybe do one album instead of an entire career. Maybe do one song instead of an entire album. I'm not going to listen to every episode of this podcast because not every song is something I'm interested in, but I do admire that they cover all kinds of music and that they are music insiders and know what they're talking about, and they revere and respect what they're talking about and the artists who made them, and their insights are often on point because they're insiders. And the snippets are just the right length to illustrate exactly what's being discussed. And they are needed here because they're discussing the recording process as opposed to just history. I relate to the host's struggles to get exposure for their own music and their other projects. I don't really have anything bad to say about this other than I'd prefer the episodes on streaming not be video and just be audio. If I want video, go to YouTube. It gums me up to have to say, don't play the video. But that's a Spotify issue and not an issue with them. Generalist shows is another type that cover all genres, sometimes with interviews, sometimes with guest hosts to talk about one specific artist or topic. No overarching format, which allows it to go wherever it wants to and thus be more inclusive and less programmatic. So not every episode is the same. One of these is backed by a lot of money, and the other one is this podcast. Music is not a genre. And I like both. Though in neither case have I listened to every episode. For the first one, it's simply because there are some topics I'm not interested enough in, and I just won't dive in. And for this podcast, it's because I record and edit it and do the damn thing, so I don't need to hear or see every episode. I do listen now and then to just check quality and some other things. What I like about that other podcast is how eclectic it is, how non-rockist it is. It's non-poptimist. I also generally like the host and the vibe and the pace. I love that it is almost exclusively coming off notes and not a script. Like this podcast, I'm reading my notes, but I'm not reading them. And I deliberately do not write them the way I would want them published because I don't want it to sound like writing. I want it to sound like talk. And when there are guests on, either commentators or the actual celebrities, the talk is rich, the questions are great, the music snippets are blessedly short, and they only are played when needed. I don't have anything bad to say about this podcast or that one. And in fact, though, I didn't model this podcast on anything because I had no idea what I was doing when I started. The closest it comes to vibe and subject is this other podcast I'm talking about, backed by a big magazine, which if you want to know what it is, along with all the other podcasts I just talk about, check out the bonus MxTRA at patreon.com/music is not a genre. And I'll tell you what podcasts I was just talking about. Now, there are other types of music podcasts out there that I don't listen to, ones that are review-based, like Fantano and people like that, or theory-based or review-based, like Beato. I don't listen to them. Shows that cover only one genre, now and then I'll tune in to some, but I'm not a big fan of those. Shows that are more about the people and the relationships than the actual music. These are more like human interest, which can be great, but I'm not really into human interest in any field, let alone music. I'd rather hear about the music, But I'm glad that some people like the gossipy part and the whole who dated who part, and that's fine. So stuff like trivia and games, great. Personal stories, great. I would probably listen to either of those if I found good ones. I haven't really looked for them yet. I prefer to get a lot of that info in writing or in documentary anyway. So 2 conclusions here. Number 1 is no 2 podcasts are alike, even when the format is identical. And that's because every host, every team brings their own vibe, their approach, their spin, and that's wonderful. Number 2 is there are a few other podcasts that are even in my category, which I'm kind of proud of because I didn't really, again, this was all organic. I didn't say years ago, here's how I'm going to do this. It has morphed since I started, and I like where it is. But all music podcasts have some overlap, and I'd like to talk about how each of the above overlaps with MxG, with this show, as follows. Social and political commentary, which most music shows shy away from. That first show I mentioned goes deep into them, and some of the others too. A more abstract idea. So rather than only talking about specific artists or genres or albums or songs, that other show, that second show, often bases its episodes around concepts, like an artist's imperial phase or something like that, which I love conceptual. I just didn't want nostalgia. Music Insiders. So only a couple of these shows actually let the music creators do the talking or are hosted by music creators. And that third one in particular with the albums takes the cake because it allows, through interviews, I imagine, though you never hear the questions, people who created whatever iconic album it is to describe the creation in detail, song by song, and throw in anything else they want to say. I think it shows even more reverence for the music and musicians than I do in many ways, which is not easy. Some overlap, insight, and opinion. That other show relies heavily on the host's interpretations of how and why the music was created. Big fans they are. And at its best provides unique insights that shed new light. I don't always agree, and they are factually not always correct about the music, but I like that. I would rather risk that and have some insight and some new way of thinking of something. Shows that are non-genre specific. A few of these podcasts are non-genre specific, and I applaud them all for it because they equalize music of all kinds. They are neither rockist nor poptimist. No overarching format, though, is my favorite because you never know what you're going to get. I do like the familiarity of, it's the same show with the same format and blah, blah, blah. And there's certain elements of my show that are the same from episode to episode. But I also like that, in particular, this one podcast, there are a lot of shows, episodes of theirs that are similar, but they have different formats within that. Like I have a sub-series on Death is Dumb. I have a sub-series on various things. so that it breaks up just the usual format, and it allows to approach things from different angles and with different methods. And that latter can also kind of describe how I make music, which, speaking of the featured song, this is Rek's latest single in collaboration with The Drop. So The Drop is this asshole who is named Nick DiMatteo, who produces music for other people and for things that are not Rek. And yes, that's me. And Rek is also me at the moment. I've gone from being band to 5-piece, 7-piece to solo to 2-piece to 3-piece, whatever. And right now it's me. When I produce, when I write and record, it's all me. So this featured song, the You Know You're Right, No Fun Pushy mix, is a remix of a song from Kite to Camden called You Know You're Right. And it's a danceable remix. And what I expect from a good remix and a good EDM song in general is that it moves it along, is that it's not the same thing over and over. It's that each section doesn't go on. I know somebody who their sections go on just maybe twice as long as they should because of some establishing thing, which is a thing you learn as you go. You need to give the listener the benefit of the doubt and not be like, well, I need to repeat this twice so they get it. No, please don't do that. So there's a difference between a mix and a remix. True. The mix is usually the song done with a different elements and a different vibe. And a remix is usually not all of the song. It's mixed up in ways. This song is mostly a remix, but I call it a mix because it's also in many ways the song itself. It's kind of in between. That's why I call it the No Fun Pushy mix. And I think if you know you're right, you're going to be surprised at how different this sounds. If you don't know it, it doesn't matter because either way, this song is a standalone song. So please go to nickdimatteo.com/music and go to the discography page and the singles there at the bottom. The You Know You're Right, No Fun Pushy mix is out, streaming everywhere. Please click like, stream it, playlist it, wherever you do that stuff. And you can also hang out in the next minute or so. I am going to play it for you as I do. Questions. Did I mention you? Are you one of the people I mentioned? Did I miss something? I know I did. In fact, one thing I missed, I will talk about in a future producer series, a correction that I'll make, because I mentioned for that series, I'm going to make corrections within the series itself. How do you think Season 8's been going so far? We're not even halfway through, but I'm pretty excited. What do you really want from a music podcast? Any music podcast? What kinds do you like? Hopefully this is one of them. And more specifically, what would you like me to talk about in 2026? What elements would you like me to add to Music Is Not a Genre in 2026? I want to know the answers to these questions and every question because as always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you for a great year. And here's looking forward to more in 2026. Happy New Year, everybody.
No fun. Cause you're no fun. No fun. Stay home. Cause you're no fun. You know I'm right. But you know I'm right. You know I'm right. Stay home. 'Cause you know I'm right. I'm right. Oh my. Yeah, you know I'm right. I'm so manipulative. Push it, push it, push it. pushy. You know I'm right. Pushy. Pushy. Oh my. Yeah. Hidden suspicions, you're afraid to believe. Hidden suspicions, you're afraid to believe. Can't keep on wishing when it's too plain to see. I just want no fun, no fun. Yeah. Hey, what you say? Yeah. I had a feeling I'd see the day. No fun, no fun. No fun. I struggle when I'm right. No fun, no fun. No fun. I struggle when I'm right. 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 I strut when I'm right. But you don't need the proof when you know you're right. You said I'm pushy.